The wind came before the snow did. It arrived the way bad things always do, quietly at first. A low moan through the pine trees on the ridge, the kind of sound you could almost convince yourself was nothing. Then it gathered. It thickened. By 8 o'clock that Thursday evening, it had become something that rattled the cabin's storm shutters like hands trying to get in. Ethan Cole stood at the window with his palms flat against the cold glass and watched the world outside disappear. He couldn't see the tree line anymore. He couldn't see the woodpile stacked against the eastern wall, though he'd built it himself 3 weeks ago, splitting and stacking 2 full cords of lodgepole pine. He could see nothing but white, dense, moving, obliterating white, and the single amber halo of the porch light failing against it. The forecast had called for 6 inches. The drifts against the cabin's north face were already at his knee. He turned away from the window. Behind him, the wood stove crackled with what was left of the evening's fire. He'd burned through more than he'd planned. The cold seeped through the old cabin's walls like something with intent, finding every gap, every unweathered seam, every place where the insulation had thinned over 40 years of Colorado winters. The thermometer on the interior wall read 52 degrees. Dropping. He needed to bring in more wood. He'd been putting it off. "Daddy." Mia's voice came from the bedroom doorway. She was 6 years old and stood wrapped in a fleece blanket she'd dragged off her bed, her dark hair tangled from sleep she hadn't quite fallen into yet. She held her stuffed rabbit, Chester, by one ear. Chester had seen better days, one button eye missing, the other hanging by a thread, but Mia loved him with a ferocity that made Ethan's chest ache. "Hey, Bug," he said. "What are you doing out of bed? It's loud." She pointed at the ceiling, meaning the wind. "And cold." "I know. I'm going to fix the cold part. Go back to bed, okay? Take Chester." She didn't move. She studied him with the particular seriousness that 6-year-olds deploy when they know something is wrong and are deciding whether to push on it. "Is the power coming back?" she asked. "Eventually. The generator's keeping us warm enough for tonight." This was not entirely true. The generator was keeping the lights on barely, but it wasn't wired to the wood stove. The wood stove was their only real heat source, and the wood stove needed wood, and the wood was outside in the blizzard. "Okay," Mia said, apparently deciding to accept this. She padded back toward her room, trailing the blanket. At the doorway, she stopped. "Chester says he doesn't like the storm." "Tell Chester the storm doesn't care what he thinks," Ethan said. "That's just how storms work." She considered this. "That's kind of mean." "I know. Get some sleep." He pulled on his coat, his boots, his gloves. He pushed through the back door into the wall of cold and the noise of the wind and the sting of blown snow against his face. He worked fast, loading his arms with wood until they shook, carrying 2 armloads back inside and stacking them by the stove. He could feel his core temperature dropping just in the minute it took each trip. The cold here at elevation, in a real Colorado mountain winter, not the romanticized ski resort version of it, was not cinematic. It was mechanical. It was the kind of cold that simply began shutting down processes, one by one, without drama or announcement. He got 6 armloads inside and latched the back door and stood in the kitchen breathing hard. His beard rhymed with ice. He loaded the stove with 3 large splits, set the damper, and watched the fire take hold. The cabin's main room warmed slowly. 46 degrees, 48. He made tea he didn't particularly want, wrapped both hands around the mug, and sat at the kitchen table with the emergency radio on low. The weather service was calling for 12 to 18 inches before morning. All roads in the county were closed until further notice. No travel recommended. He was isolated. That part he was used to. After Sarah died 3 years ago, January, black ice on Route 9, he'd come up to the cabin more and more. At first, just weekends with Mia, then whole months. Then he'd quietly, almost accidentally, made it permanent. Denver felt like someone else's city now, full of someone else's memories. The wind gusted hard enough to shake the front door in its frame. Ethan sat with his tea and listened to the sound of the storm doing what it did, which was everything it wanted. He was not a man given to fear. He'd served 2 tours overseas, built 3 businesses from nothing, buried his wife at 34, and raised his daughter alone through all of it. Fear was not the word for what he felt sitting in that cabin. It was something smaller and more honest than fear. Loneliness, maybe, or just the awareness of it. He was thinking about this, or trying not to, when something hit the front door. Not the wind, not a branch. Something with weight and intention behind it. He set down his mug. The sound came again. A knock, or something so close to a knock that the difference didn't matter. He was on his feet before he'd decided to move. No one came up this road in a blizzard. No one was within 4 miles of this cabin. No one even knew he was here. He hadn't told anyone where he was spending the week, a habit he now recognized as imperfect. He crossed to the door, unlatched it, and pulled it open. The cold came in first, then the shape of her. She was standing on the porch, barely standing, really. One hand braced against the doorframe, and the other arm wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her own heat in by force. She wore a down jacket that had soaked through completely. Her jeans were dark with moisture to the thigh. Her face was the color of old paper, and her lips were a shade of blue that had no business being on a living person. She was shaking so hard her teeth knocked together. Ethan's first thought, the soldier's thought, was threat assessment. His second thought was hypothermia. His third thought, which arrived like a fist to the sternum, was recognition. "Lily," he said. Her eyes found his. They were glassy and slow to focus, but they found him. Lily Harper, 29 years old. His stepfather's daughter, which made her his stepsister in the eyes of a family that no longer existed in any functional sense. He hadn't seen her in 4 years. The last time, there had been raised voices and a door slammed, and the specific silence that comes after someone says something that cannot be unsaid. "Ethan," she said. It came out wrong, slurred, effortful, like she was speaking through a layer of cotton. He moved. He didn't decide to. He simply moved, stepping out onto the porch, getting his arm around her before her knees could finish their project of buckling, and pulling her inside. She was lighter than he remembered, or he was stronger, or she had nothing left to push back with. He got her to the couch in front of the wood stove. She sat down in the way water sits down, no real shape to it, just a collapse into whatever holds her. Up close, in the light, she looked worse. Her fingers were white at the tips. Her brows and lashes were crusted with ice. The shaking was continuous and deep, the kind that comes from core muscles, not just skin. "How long were you outside?" he asked. His voice came out flat and operational. He was already pulling off her soaked jacket. The car went off. She stopped, swallowed. 2 miles, maybe more. I walked 2 miles. In this, without the right gear, "Can you tell me your name?" She looked at him like the question was strange. "You know tell me your name." "Lily Harper." She paused. "Cole. Harper. I don't know. Both." A breath. Lily, mild to moderate. Not severe yet, or she wouldn't be coherent, but moving in that direction faster than he liked. He got her boots off. She flinched when he touched her feet, which was good. Pain meant sensation, and then her wet socks. He grabbed the 2 wool blankets from the cedar chest by the wall. The emergency ones he kept there for exactly this kind of situation, or for a situation he'd imagined was less specific than this. He wrapped them around her. He put a wool hat on her head, pulling it down over her wet hair. He went to the kitchen and ran the tap until the water was warm, not hot, warm, and brought back a mug of it and pressed it into her hands. She held it, but didn't drink. "Drink," he said. She drank. He was not looking at her face. He was assessing. Fingers, toes, ears, nose, the speed of her shaking, the color returning or not returning to her skin. He was not thinking about 4 years ago. He was not thinking about the phone calls he'd sent to voicemail, or the ones she'd sent to voicemail, or the letter he'd written and not sent, or the ones she might have written and not sent. He was thinking about her core temperature and what he had available to bring it up. Mia appeared in the bedroom doorway again. She stared at Lily with the wide-open, uncomplicated curiosity of a child who hadn't yet learned to pretend not to stare. "Who's that?" she whispered. "Someone who needs help," Ethan said. "Go back to bed, Mia. Is she sick?" "She's cold. I'm fixing it." Bed. Mia looked at Lily for another moment. Then, quietly, "Do you want Chester?" Lily's eyes moved to Mia. Something in her face shifted just slightly, just at the edges, but Ethan saw it. It was the expression of someone who has been braced for a very long time and has just been caught off guard. "I'm okay," Lily said, and her voice was already clearer than it had been. "Thank you." Mia nodded seriously and went back to bed. The fire in the stove ticked and popped. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls of the cabin with everything it had. Ethan sat in the chair across from the couch and watched Lily shake and begin, gradually and reluctantly, to stop. He didn't ask her what she was doing here. He didn't ask about the car, or how she'd known where he was, or what 4 years of silence had meant to her. He didn't ask any of the things that were lined up behind his teeth waiting to be said. He watched her breathe. The thermometer in the main room dropped to 44 degrees before the wood stove caught up. Ethan kept loading it. Split after split, the orange light of the fire pressing out through the iron grate, the smell of burning pine filling the cabin. He moved between the stove and the window and the couch where Lily sat, wrapped in wool and wool and wool. Her hands around her third mug of warm water, the shaking in her shoulders slowly decreasing to something more like trembling, and then to something more like stillness. She had not stopped being pale, but the blue had left her lips. He checked her fingers. The color was coming back white, going to pink, going to the faint red of returning circulation. He asked her to wiggle them, and she did. He asked her to wiggle her toes, and she did, though it made her wince. "Any numbness that won't go away?" he asked. "No," she said. "Just." She looked for the word. "Pins and needles. That's good. That's the blood coming back. You know a lot about this. I've been cold before." She almost smiled. Almost. It didn't quite make it. He sat back in the chair. The fire was steady now. The room was climbing toward 58 degrees. Outside, the blizzard continued to operate entirely without reference to what was happening inside, which is what blizzards do. Mia had not come back out, but Ethan could hear the particular quality of silence from her room that meant she was asleep, a specific settled quality, different from the silence of a child lying awake pretending. The cabin was quiet except for the fire and the storm. He looked at Lily. She was looking at the fire. Her jaw was set in the way it had always been. He remembered this, the specific architecture of her composure, the way she held herself together as a structural principle rather than an aesthetic one. She'd had that quality since she was a teenager. He'd admired it then and resented it later, and he wasn't sure what he did with it now. "Your car?" he said. "Ditch, about 2 miles down the access road. I hit a patch of ice, went sideways." She paused. "It's a rental." "I'd only had it for—" She stopped, shook her head. "It doesn't matter. You have a phone?" "Dead. Battery died before I got halfway here. I had a portable charger, but it was in the car with everything else." He nodded. His own satellite phone was on the charging station by the door. He'd check on the car in the morning, or call it in when the storm broke, or both. "How did you know I was here?" he asked. A pause. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Albrecht. I called the number in your mom's old address book. I still had it, and she picked up and she said you came up to the cabin a lot and she thought you might be there this week." His mother had been dead for 2 years. He hadn't thought about that address book. "She gave you the access road directions." "She did." He sat with this. Across from him, Lily pulled her knees up inside the blankets and rested her chin on them. She looked, for a moment, very young, younger than 29, younger even than the last time he'd seen her. She looked the way people look when they have been frightened past the point of managing it and have come out the other side not quite themselves. "You drove up the mountain," he said, "in a blizzard, with an address and a guess." She met his eyes. Yes, he wanted to ask why. He wanted to ask what was so urgent, what had happened, what 4 years of absence had looked like from the inside. He wanted to ask a lot of things, and he asked none of them, because Lily Harper was 29 degrees hypothermic on his couch, and the wind outside was hitting 60 miles an hour, and there was time for questions later. If there was time at all. "You should sleep," he said. She didn't argue. She lay down on the couch, the blankets still wrapped around her, her eyes already closing before she'd finished adjusting her position. Within minutes her breathing was slow and even. He watched her sleep. Then he loaded the stove again and sat back in his chair and did not sleep himself. By midnight, the situation changed. The wood stove was not keeping up. The cabin had climbed to 56 degrees and held there for 2 hours, but now it was sliding back down 54, 52. The wind had found a new angle, coming in from the northwest now, pushing cold through the gaps around the north-facing windows that the stove simply couldn't outrun. Ethan had taped plastic sheeting over them, an old trick, but the wind pressed through the seams anyway. He had enough wood. That wasn't the problem. The problem was Lily's core temperature. She'd stopped shaking, which was good, but she'd also stopped responding when he said her name, which was not good. He pressed the back of his hand to her forehead, cold, still meaningfully cold, not the cold of sleep, but the cold of a body still fighting its way back up from a deficit. He needed to get her temperature up faster than the stove was going to manage it. He stood in the middle of the cabin in the dark the generator had given out an hour ago, just the firelight now, and worked through his options. He'd done wilderness first aid training. He remembered the principles. For moderate hypothermia with a responsive but deteriorating patient, the priorities were: get them out of wet clothing, insulate them, apply external heat sources, and, if necessary, use direct body-to-body heat transfer. He had done the first two. He did not have an electric blanket or a heating pad, because the generator was dead. He did not have chemical heat packs. He'd used the last of them in October. He did not have, in any practical sense, any external heat source except the wood stove, which was on the other side of the room, and himself. He stood there for a moment. "This is a medical decision," he told himself. "This is first aid. This is the same choice a rescue worker makes." He went to Mia's room. She was deeply asleep, curled on her side around Chester, her breathing slow and steady and warm. He left her where she was. He went back to the main room and moved the couch closer to the wood stove, close enough to feel the heat directly, not so close as to be a hazard. He sat down beside Lily, close enough that their arms touched through the layers of blanket. He felt the cold radiating off her and pulled the outermost blanket up and around both of them. He was acutely aware of the awkwardness of this, of the years between them, the history, the silence, the things that had been said and the things that hadn't. He was aware that Lily was not in any position to consent to or object to this arrangement, and he noted, carefully, that what he was doing was keeping her alive and that these two facts did not need to be in conflict. He sat up against the back of the couch, arms at his sides, as still as he could be. A heat source. That was the function he was performing. After a while, he felt the cold between them begin, fractionally, to change. His body heat moved into the space between them, into the blankets, into her. It happened slowly, the way all real warming happens, not in a moment of resolution, but in degrees so small you could only measure them by their accumulation. She was still cold against his arm, and then she was less cold, and then, very gradually, she was simply present beside him the way another person is present, radiating the ordinary temperature of being alive. He did not sleep. He sat and watched the fire and listened to the wind and kept his arm where it was. At some point in the deep middle of the night, Mia padded out from her bedroom, looked at the two of them on the couch with the clear eyes of a child for whom the world is still mostly explicable, and climbed up on Lily's other side with Chester under her arm. "It's warmer here," Mia announced softly. "Go to sleep," Ethan said. She did, with the immediate efficiency of the young. He sat between his daughter and his stepsister and watched the fire, and didn't sleep and didn't think about the future, because the future was a luxury that only made sense once you'd secured the present, and the present was still the most uncertain thing in the room. The deepest part of the night has a particular quality. Not quiet outside, there was nothing resembling quiet. The storm still working at full amplitude. The pine trees groaning under the weight of accumulated snow. The wind finding new registers in the gaps and eaves of the old cabin. But inside there was something that functioned as silence, even within the noise. The silence of breath, of warmth, of three people in a circle of firelight while the world outside did its worst. Ethan was aware of everything. The slow rhythm of Mia's breathing against Lily's shoulder. The slight, almost imperceptible shift in Lily's tension. A body that had been braced for cold beginning, very slowly, to release that bracing. The way the fire moved through the grate, orange and constant, requiring nothing from him for a little while. He was aware of the weight of 4 years. He had a specific memory of the last day he'd seen Lily. It was at his mother's house in Thornfield, 6 months before she died. And it had been a Sunday in November, and the light had been flat and gray through the kitchen windows. They'd been arguing about his stepfather's estate. Gerald Harper had died the previous spring, leaving behind a will that was a masterwork of ambiguity, and a financial situation that was a masterwork of chaos. There were accounts that neither of them had known about. There were debts. There was a second property in New Mexico that no one had mentioned, and everyone was expected to have opinions about. They'd been civil for most of it. And then they hadn't been. He didn't remember exactly what had been said. He remembered the shape of it. Accusations about whose side each of them had taken when Gerald and his mother were divorcing. Accusations about who had been available and who had been absent. Accusations about the kind of person he was, and the kind of person she was, and the kind of family they'd all failed to be. He remembered Lily saying something that landed precisely at the intersection of true and cruel, the specific alchemy of a wound, and he remembered saying something back that he'd known, even as he said it, was both. She'd left. He hadn't called. She hadn't called. And then the silence had accumulated the way silence does, until calling seemed like acknowledging that the silence had meant something, and not calling seemed easier than that. He looked at her now, in the firelight. She was not who he remembered from that Sunday. Or she was, but with something added, an exhaustion that had settled into the set of her face, not new but deepened, the kind that comes from a long time without rest. She was still Lily, the same angle of her jaw, the same tendency to furrow her brow even in sleep, like she was working on something. He remembered that she'd furrowed her brow exactly the same way at 7 years old, working through a math problem at the kitchen table, and Gerald had laughed and said that was how you could tell she was thinking. He wondered what she'd been thinking about. These 4 years. He wondered what she'd lost, and in what order. Mia shifted in her sleep, adjusting her grip on Chester, and her small warm hand found Lily's arm under the blanket, not intentionally, just the unconscious navigation of a sleeping child reaching for warmth, and rested there. Lily didn't wake, but something in her face changed. The furrow at her brow smoothed slightly. The fire ticked and breathed. The wind pushed against the walls. The thermometer climbed past 58. Ethan sat with the weight of 4 years and let it be heavy, because some things have to be heavy before they can become anything else. Sometime around 3 in the morning, Lily woke, not with a start, quietly, in the way that people wake from deep exhaustion. A long blink, a slow recalibration of where she was and what was real. She looked at the fire first. Then at Mia, asleep against her side. Then at Ethan, he was already awake. He'd been awake the whole time. He said nothing. She looked at him for a long moment in the firelight. Her expression was difficult to read, not guarded, exactly, but careful. The way you are careful with a thing you're not sure will hold your weight. He waited. She turned back toward the fire. A minute passed. 2. The wind had dropped slightly, not gone, but diminished, as if even it needed to rest. Then, quietly, so quietly that he almost didn't hear it over the sound of the storm. I didn't have anywhere else to go. He didn't answer right away. He let the words sit in the room. Okay, he said finally. Just that, she exhaled. I know she stopped. Tried again. I know there's a lot. I know I can't just show up and expect. Lily. She stopped. You're here, he said. That's the thing that's true right now. You're here, and you're warm. She looked at him. Her eyes were dark in the firelight and very awake now. I lost the apartment in March, she said. Job in August. The one in Chicago. A pause. I was trying to hold on to what was left. I was doing okay for a while. I stayed with friends. I picked up work. I thought I had a plan. Another pause, longer this time. The plan didn't work out. He listened. I've been in my car since October. Driving around. Not going anywhere, just she looked at her hands. Mia's name is from Sarah, isn't it? Sarah's grandmother. The shift surprised him. Yes, I remembered when you told me that, at the wedding. You were so, she almost smiled. You were so nervous about getting it right. The name. Like you needed to carry it the right way. He didn't say anything. I've thought about calling you, Lily said. A lot. I didn't know how to start. I didn't know if she stopped. I found the address from Mrs. Albrecht and I drove up here, and I kept thinking, the whole drive, that you'd probably just send me away, and that would be reasonable. That would make sense, and I had nowhere else to go, and I was. Her voice went very quiet. I was so tired. He sat with this for a long time. Mia stirred, tightening her small grip on Lily's arm without waking. You're not going anywhere tonight, Ethan said. And not because of the storm. Lily looked at him. You're not going anywhere, he said again. She didn't answer. She didn't argue. She turned back to the fire, and he watched something in her face change, not dramatically. Not the way things change in stories, but the way they change in real life. Slowly, fractionally, one long-held breath at a time. She was still awake when the fire settled into its lower register, the big splits burning down to coals, and Ethan got up quietly to load it again. When he came back, she was asleep. Mia was asleep. He sat back in his place at the end of the couch, and this time, finally, he let himself close his eyes. He didn't forgive everything. He didn't unfeel 4 years. But he let himself stop carrying it just for the night, and felt the difference lighter, and also somehow more honest. Outside, the blizzard said what it always says, which is nothing at all. He slept in intervals, 20 minutes, maybe 30, then awake again, checking the stove, checking Lily, checking Mia. He developed a rhythm. Fuel the fire, listen to the wind, go back to the couch. It was the kind of sleep that soldiers learn, not rest so much as the suspension of full alertness. One ear always turned toward anything that might require action. The storm outside hit its peak somewhere around 4 in the morning. He knew it by the sound, a sustained roar, not the gust and settle rhythm of earlier, but something continuous and enormous. The full pressure of the system centered directly overhead. The cabin trembled. The chimney pipe hummed. At one point, a branch hit the roof with a sound like a gunshot, and Mia woke up crying before she was even fully awake, and Ethan crossed the room in the dark and put his hand on her back and said, "It's okay. It's a tree. It's outside. Go back to sleep." And she did, almost immediately, because she trusted him completely. He envied her that. At 5 in the morning, Lily spoke again from the couch. He turned. She was lying with her eyes open, looking at the ceiling. "Does she always do that?" Lily asked. "Fall back asleep like that. She trusts that things are okay if I say they're okay," he said. "She's still young enough for that." Lily paused. "That's a lot of responsibility." "It is." She was quiet for a moment. "You've been alone with her the whole time?" 3 years. "No one." "No." He let this stand on its own. She turned her head to look at him. Her color was entirely normal now, or as normal as anyone looks at 5 in the morning in a cabin after a long night. "I didn't know it was that isolated. I mean, I knew, but I didn't." "It's fine," he said. "What did you need it for?" He thought about how to answer. "Quiet," he said. After Sarah, there was a lot of noise everywhere. Condolences, advice, people wanting to help in ways that weren't helpful. I needed a place where I could be sad without people watching me do it. Lily was quiet for a moment. "I can understand that. I know you can." She sat up slowly, testing how she felt. She looked silly. Her posture had returned to something more like its ordinary shape. The architecture of her composure reassembled. She was still tired, but the frightening fragility of the night before had left her. "What happened?" he asked. "Before Chicago. Tell me the whole thing." She looked at him for a moment, measuring something. Then she told him. It took a while. The job in Chicago had been at a marketing consultancy, 3 years of good work, then a restructuring, then her position eliminated along with 30 others. She'd had savings, she'd used them. An apartment that had felt provisional from the beginning. A relationship that had ended 6 months before the job did, which in retrospect had been the beginning of the unraveling. Because she'd been leaning on that relationship for more than she'd understood. "I kept thinking I was about to turn the corner," she said. "That's the thing. Every month I thought, next month will be the month it stabilizes. And then it didn't. Why didn't you ask for help?" She gave him a look. "Right," he said. "It's not just you," she said. "I couldn't ask anyone. I grew up watching Gerald manage everything alone, even when he was drowning. I absorbed it. Gerald drowned anyway. I know." She said this without bitterness, or with bitterness so old and processed it had become something else. Fact, maybe. History. "I know that. I've been thinking about that a lot." He listened. Outside, the storm had begun, incrementally, almost imperceptibly, to quiet. At some point, Mia woke up properly, with her full morning consciousness, and climbed over Lily to get to the kitchen, announcing that she needed water, that Chester was also thirsty, and that the wind was less loud now, which was good because the loud wind was inconsiderate. Lily watched her with an expression that Ethan couldn't name but recognized something between wonder and something more fragile than wonder. "She's very specific," Lily said. "Extremely," he said. "She looks like Sarah." "Yes," he said. "She does." The storm broke at 7:42 in the morning. Not gradually, but specifically, Ethan was at the window when it happened, and there was a moment where the wind dropped and the snow stopped, and the clouds broke in the northeast, and pale gray winter light came through the gap, landing on 12 inches of fresh snow that covered everything in the valley below like a held breath. Then the light strengthened and the clouds pulled further apart, and by 8:15 it was a clear Colorado mountain morning. Painfully blue sky. Sun off the snow had a brightness that required squinting, and a silence so complete after the night's sound that it felt almost loud. Mia pressed her face against the window. "It's so pretty," she said. "It's like the world got a new coat." "A coat of snow," Lily said from behind her. "Like a big blanket," Mia decided. "Like when we put Chester under the covers." Lily met Ethan's eyes over Mia's head. The corner of her mouth did something that was almost a smile and then completed the project. He made coffee on the camp stove. The regular kitchen was electric, but he kept a propane camp stove for exactly this reason, and scrambled eggs from the 6 that remained in the cooler and they ate at the small kitchen table, the three of them, in the particular and unlikely warmth of a morning after a bad night. Mia told Lily about Chester's history, which was extensive. How she'd gotten him, where he'd been, the specific incident with the washing machine that had cost him his eye, the subsequent emergency surgery in which Ethan had sewn it back only for it to fall off again 2 weeks later. Lily listened with complete attention, asking clarifying questions, taking Chester's history seriously. Ethan watched them. Then he refilled his coffee and said, "Tell me what actually happened with the car. I came in from the highway, got about 2 miles up your access road." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "The road turned and I didn't turn with it quite fast enough. Front wheel went into the ditch. I tried to reverse out and just dug in deeper." She shrugged. By then the snow was already bad. "I waited 20 minutes to see if it would improve. It didn't. You made the right call, getting out and walking," he said. "Some people stay in the car. I know you're not supposed to stay in the car. Some people stay anyway. They freeze faster because the car stops holding heat once it's not running." She nodded. "I kept telling myself to keep moving. I remembered, I don't know, from something I read that hypothermia affects decision-making before you realize it's affecting it. So I kept making very conscious decisions. Move. Next step. Move. That's the right instinct. It still took me," she paused. "When I finally saw the porch light, I wasn't sure it was real." He said nothing to this. He didn't have anything useful to say about the moment she'd seen the porch light from the road, about what those last 100 yards had cost her, about the fact that if the generator had failed earlier, if the light had been off, if she'd missed the turn in the dark and the snow. He didn't go there. Going there was not useful. "I'm going to call in the car," he said. "Give the towing company the coordinates. They'll get it out when the roads are open." "I don't know how I'm going to pay for that," she said. "Right now, I don't." "Lily." She stopped. "One thing at a time," he said. She looked at him. He didn't look away. "Okay," she said. Outside, Mia had her face pressed to the window again, breath fogging the glass, watching a jay work through the snow-covered branches of the spruce nearest the cabin, looking for anything worth the effort. The next 2 days were quiet in the way that the aftermath of storms is quiet. Roads stayed closed through Friday. The towing company confirmed they'd retrieve the rental car Saturday when the access road was passable. They had enough food, Ethan had provisioned well, and enough wood and enough propane. The generator came back on Friday afternoon, and the cabin returned to its ordinary electrical life. Lights. The small electric space heater as a supplement. Mia's nightlight. They fell into a rhythm that felt tentative at first, and then, gradually, less so. In the mornings, Ethan made breakfast, while Lily helped Mia with her reading. Mia was working through a series of early chapter books and had opinions about all of them, most of which centered on which animals the books featured and whether those animals were being treated fairly by the narrative. Lily engaged with these opinions seriously. They had long discussions about whether the rabbit in one book had made reasonable choices given its options. "The rabbit should have asked for help earlier," Mia said. "That was the problem. You're probably right," Lily said. Ethan, at the stove, said nothing. In the afternoons, they shoveled. The cabin had to be dug out, the woodpile uncovered, the path to the back cleared. This was real, physical work, heavy, wet snow, the kind that goes straight to the back if you don't pace yourself, and they did it without talking much, in the companionable silence of people working toward the same thing. Mia had her own small shovel and contributed with tremendous enthusiasm and debatable efficiency. In the evenings, they sat by the fire. They talked sometimes about the years between, about what had happened and why, and what they'd each understood about it at the time versus what they understood now. These conversations were not easy. They did not have the clean resolution of conversations in stories where people say the true thing and then the thing is resolved. They had the actual quality of repair, halting, recursive, sometimes arriving somewhere useful, and sometimes just arriving at the same open question from a different angle. One evening, Lily said, "I shouldn't have said what I said about Sarah." He had been waiting for this. Or not waiting, he hadn't been tracking the specific owed apologies, hadn't kept a ledger. But he recognized the moment. "What did you say?" he asked. "That she was the reason you were never really part of the family, that you were always going to leave anyway." She looked at the fire. "That was cruel. It was cruel, and it was wrong. It was wrong," he said. "But I said things too. You said I was using Dad's death as an excuse to act out. You weren't. No." A pause. I was 25 and I'd just lost the second parent I'd had, and I had no idea what to do with that." He was quiet. "I didn't handle grief well," she said. "Neither did I," he said. "The first year after Sarah, he stopped. I wasn't kind to people. I pushed everyone away. I thought that was strength. I thought I was protecting Mia from watching me fall apart. What I was actually doing was teaching myself that isolation was the solution." "Is that why you came up here?" "Partly." He looked at the fire. "But also, it's genuinely good up here. I know that sounds like a rationalization, but Mia is good up here. She's outdoors. She has space. The quiet is real." He paused. "I wasn't just running away. I was also going somewhere." Lily nodded slowly. "I believe that. I know you do." Another evening, Mia asked Lily if she was going to stay. The question came with the directness that children deploy without knowing it's a weapon. Simply, "At dinner?" While reaching for more bread. "Are you going to stay here? With us?" Lily looked at Ethan. He looked back at her. He kept his face neutral, deliberately, because it was not his question to answer. "I don't know yet," Lily said. "I need to figure some things out." "What things?" "Grown-up things." Mia considered this. "Grown-up things take a long time." "They do," Lily agreed. "Chester thinks you should stay," Mia said. "He told me." "Chester is biased," Lily said. "He's very generous to people who feed him imaginary carrots." Mia laughed, surprised and delighted by this. It was the first time Ethan had heard her laugh since Lily had arrived, and the sound of it, uncomplicated, full of air, was the thing that shifted something in the room. Ethan looked at Lily. She was still smiling at Mia, and the smile had done something to her face, broken through. Maybe the careful management of it, and she looked like herself. The self he remembered before the fight, before the years of silence, before whatever the last 4 years had added. He thought, "She doesn't have anywhere to go." And he thought, immediately after, "That's not why I want her to stay." He wasn't sure when that second thought had arrived. He filed it away for later examination. Later, when there was time. Later, when they'd both had enough rest and enough honesty to know the difference between gratitude and something more complicated. Saturday morning, the towing company called. The rental car was out of the ditch, they said, drivable, no structural damage. They'd leave it in the lot at the bottom of the access road. Ethan passed this information to Lily. She nodded. She looked at the window where the sky was clear and the snow was beginning to compress and settle, and in a few days the road would be fully passable. "I need to call the rental company," she said, "and figure out." She stopped. "You don't have to decide today," he said. "The car is a decision," she said. "I'm paying for every extra day. I'll cover it." "Ethan, I'll cover it," he said again, and his voice had the quality of someone who is not proposing a discussion. "Take the time you need." She looked at him for a long moment. He could see her working through the specific arithmetic of independence, what it cost her to accept help, what it had cost her not to. "For now," she said. "Just for now." "For now," he agreed. The third Sunday, the road was clear. Ethan drove down to collect the rental car, following his truck with his hazard lights on so Lily could drive it back up to the cabin. She returned it to the agency herself on Monday. He drove her down and they had lunch at the diner in Creston, the only town within 20 miles that had anything like a diner, and Mia got pancakes with maple syrup, and reported that they were the best pancakes she had ever had, which she reported every time they came to this diner. On the drive back, Lily was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I looked up some positions in Denver, remote ones, mostly. Marketing strategy, some communications consulting." She was looking at the road. "If I'm going to take time to figure things out, I should probably also be doing something. Otherwise, figuring things out becomes an excuse to do nothing." "That sounds like you," he said. She looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means you've always worked while you thought. You can't sit still and think. You have to be doing something at the same time." He paused. "I remember you studying for finals with the TV on and music playing, and somehow that was the right conditions." She was quiet for a moment. "You remember that. I remember a lot of things." Another silence, less loaded than it would have been a week ago. "I'm not asking to stay indefinitely," she said. "I know this is your place, yours and Mia's. I know you're not asking. She stopped. "I need a little time. To rebuild from something real, not from a pause. From a place that's actually stable. I haven't had that in a while." He kept his eyes on the road. The mountains on either side were white and enormous and indifferent. The way mountains are, they don't care about the stories being told in the cars on their roads, but they make a good backdrop for them. "There's a second bedroom," he said. "Besides Mia's." She didn't answer right away. "It's a storage room," he said. "Technically, there's a camp bed under the boxes. I can clear it out. You don't have to. The camp bed is actually comfortable," he said. "I've slept on it." "Ethan." "What? Are you sure?" She said it as a real question, not a polite one. She turned to look at him, and he took his eyes off the road for a moment to meet hers. And she was asking seriously, "Are you sure about this? Have you thought it through? Is this a decision you're making or a reflex you're acting on?" He thought about it. Genuinely. He thought about the past week, the shoveling, the evenings by the fire, Mia's laughter. He thought about Lily at 3 in the morning saying, "I didn't have anywhere else to go," and the way it had sounded, not as an accusation or an appeal to guilt, but as a plain statement of fact that had also somehow contained everything that needed to be said. He thought about the fight at his mother's house in Thornfield, and how both of them had been telling the truth in a language designed to wound rather than communicate, and how much of the 4 years of silence had been a failure to find a different language. He thought about his daughter, who had given a stuffed rabbit to a stranger, because she understood something about generosity that he'd had to relearn. "Yes," he said, "I'm sure." They drove the rest of the way back in quiet, the kind of quiet that has space in it rather than pressure the quiet of two people who have, at least provisionally, stopped needing to fill everything with words. Back at the cabin, Mia met them at the door. "Did you bring anything?" she asked, meaning food or treats, because she was 6, and this was a reasonable expectation of people returning from town. "We brought us," Lily said. Mia considered this. "That's not as good as muffins," she said. "But it's okay." And she turned and went back inside, leaving the door open behind her. Lily stood at the top of the porch, steps in the cold, clear afternoon light. She looked at the mountains. She looked at the cabin. She looked at the open door. Then she went inside. Ethan stood on the porch for a moment by himself. The air was sharp and clean and cold in the particular way of mountains after a storm scoured, as if the blizzard had taken with it everything that wasn't essential and left only what remained when you stripped everything else back. He could hear, through the open door, Mia explaining to Lily the specific protocol for Chester's afternoon nap, which was extensive and apparently non-negotiable. He could hear Lily listening. He stood on the porch until the cold made him honest, and then he went back inside and closed the door behind him. Sometimes the thing that saves a person isn't a solution. It's a door that opens at the right moment, and someone on the other side of it who decides, despite everything, against the weight of years and silence and all the good reasons not to leave it open. That's the whole of it. That's all there is.